There's a specific version of anxiety that never looks like anxiety. It looks like being very prepared. It looks like reading a room well. It looks like never being able to fully relax, but handling everything anyway. If you've looked up anxiety symptoms before and thought, that's not quite me, this video is going to explain why. Because the list you found was built for a different version of this, the visible version. The one that looks like dysfunction. This is about the version that looks like competence. Here's what this video is going to do. It's going to name 7 signs, not the obvious ones, the ones that look so much like personality traits or strengths that most people carrying them have never once considered they might be symptoms. And for at least a few of them, you're going to feel something that's hard to describe, a kind of recognition that's different from just agreeing with a sentence. That feeling is the point. Most anxiety content describes the same set of signs: panic attacks, avoidance, visible distress, the person who cancels plans, the person who can't walk into a room without their heart racing, the person who is, in some legible way, not okay. And if you've read those descriptions and thought, that's not me, you probably drew one of 2 conclusions. Either you don't have anxiety, or you have something that doesn't have a name yet. Here's what actually happened. The description failed to reach you, because there's a version of anxiety that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't interrupt your functioning. It runs underneath it. It's not the thing that stops you from doing things. It's the thing that makes doing things feel like more than it should. And the reason this version gets missed by the person living it, by the people around them, sometimes even by clinicians, is that the signs don't look like suffering. They look like being good at things, which means that if you're sitting here wondering whether this video is even going to apply to you, hold that thought, because that wondering, we're going to come back to that. Sign 1, you over-prepare. Not a little, in a way that other people notice and call thorough or detail-oriented or just how you are. You read the menu before the restaurant. You rehearse the conversation before you have it. You run the scenario in advance. What could go wrong? What you'd say if it did, how you'd handle the version after that. And it works. That's the thing. You show up prepared. You handle things. So it never occurs to anyone, including you, to ask what it would feel like to not do all of that. Here's what's actually happening underneath it. The nervous system that does this has learned, usually over a very long time, usually beginning earlier than you'd think, that being unprepared was dangerous. Not inconvenient. Dangerous, so it prepares. Compulsively, automatically, exhaustingly, not because you're a perfectionist, because your nervous system decided, at some point, that preparation was the price of safety. Anyone who's been in this knows the specific fatigue of arriving somewhere you're already ready for and still not being able to relax. That's not a character flaw. That's a nervous system pattern. Sign 2. Good news doesn't land the way it should. Something goes right. A project, a relationship, a moment. And instead of settling into it, something in you is already scanning, waiting, for the part where it goes wrong. For the catch. For the other shoe that hasn't dropped yet but will, because things that feel this okay don't stay this okay. Other people would call this being realistic. Or not getting your hopes up. Or being smart about expectations. And maybe it's been useful. Maybe it's meant you weren't blindsided as often as some people are. But useful and healthy are not the same thing. And a nervous system that can't receive good news isn't being cautious. It's still running the scan. It just redirected it at the present moment. Sign 3. There's tension somewhere in your body, almost always, that doesn't have an obvious source. Jaw, shoulders, chest. The space just behind the sternum. Not pain, exactly, just held. And when someone asks if you're stressed, you say not really, because you're not stressed about anything in particular, which is true. What's also true is that your body has been carrying a low level of bracing for so long that you've stopped registering it as unusual. That baseline tension isn't stress about a thing. It's a nervous system that never received the signal that it was okay to fully let go. Research on chronic muscle tension in anxious individuals consistently shows this pattern. Not acute tension in response to a trigger, but a resting state of mild activation that the person has normalized over years. You're not a tense person. You're a person whose nervous system never fully deactivated. That distinction matters more than it sounds. Sign 4. You are rarely fully in the room. Physically present, technically participating, but a part of you is somewhere else, usually slightly ahead or slightly behind. Rehearsing what you're going to say before you say it. replaying what you said after you said it, monitoring the room while pretending to just be in it. Other people experience this as you being thoughtful, or a good listener, or someone who is clearly paying attention. And you are paying attention. You're just paying it to 3 conversations at once. The one happening, the one you're preparing for, and the one you're still processing from earlier. That's not a personality type. That's a nervous system that never received permission to just be somewhere without managing it. Sign 5. Social situations leave you depleted in a way that doesn't match how the interaction looked from the outside. You were fine in the room, maybe more than fine, warm, engaged, present in all the ways people can observe. But somewhere between the door and the drive home, something gives out. And the tiredness isn't ordinary tiredness. It has a specific quality, like you were holding something the entire time. And now that you've stopped holding it, the weight of it hits you. This gets called introversion. And sometimes it is. But there's a version of this that isn't about social energy at all. It's about the cost of performing calm in a room where you were also monitoring, managing, and adjusting in real time. Anyone who's been in the performing calm version of this knows the difference between tired from socializing and hollow from holding it together. One is a preference. The other is a tax. Sign 6. Lying down is when everything turns on. The day was manageable. You got through it. You did the things you were supposed to do. And then you got into bed. And your nervous system, which had been waiting, apparently, for exactly this moment of stillness, began. The list, the replay, the thing you said, the thing you should have said, the scenario you haven't built yet but are apparently starting now. There's a specific cruelty to this one, because the moment that's supposed to be rest becomes the moment of highest activation. And over time, you start to dread it. Not sleep exactly, but the lying down. The moment where there's nothing left to do, and the noise, which had somewhere to go all day, finally has nowhere left to go but in. That's not insomnia in the standard sense. That's a nervous system that equates stillness with threat. Because for a long time, maybe a very long time, stillness wasn't safe. Vigilance was. And it's still running that program. Sign 7. You are not sure this applies to you. Even now, having recognized some version of yourself in 1 or 2 or 4 of the things on this list, there's a part of you that's still running the question. Is this real? Is it serious enough? Other people have it worse. Maybe I'm just like this. Maybe this is just who I am. That loop, the one questioning whether your experience is legitimate, is not skepticism. It's not intelligence working correctly. It's sign 7. Because one of the consistent features of high-functioning anxiety is that the nervous system turns its own machinery against the evidence of itself. It generates the experience and then generates doubt about the experience. It creates the symptoms and then creates the question of whether they count. The legitimacy loop isn't the nervous system failing. It's the nervous system doing exactly what it always does, protecting you from the vulnerability of admitting that something is real. Because if it's real, you have to feel it. And feeling it fully, without the managing, is the thing the nervous system has been trying to prevent for as long as you can remember. Let's go one level deeper. These aren't 7 separate things. They're one thing. One nervous system, one learned pattern, expressing itself across 7 different surfaces. The preparation, the scanning, the tension, the absence, the social tax, the nighttime activation, the questioning. All of it is the same underlying signal. Stay ready. Don't fully land. The cost of being caught off guard is higher than the cost of never fully relaxing. Your nervous system learned that somewhere. It learned it the way bodies learn things. Not consciously, not as a decision, but as an adaptation that worked. The problem isn't that it learned wrong. The problem is that it's still running a program written for a set of circumstances that no longer exist. That's not a character flaw. That's a nervous system pattern, and a pattern is not a life sentence. If any of these signs landed and you're sitting with the question of which version of this is specifically yours, there's a quiz in the description built exactly for that. 7 minutes. It identifies your dominant overthinking pattern and gives you a precise explanation of why your specific version exists and what actually interrupts it. Not a general result, something that names your particular shape of this. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. Now let's talk about what changes when a sign becomes a sign, instead of just who you are. Not everything, not immediately. This isn't the part where the weight lifts. But something specific shifts. When you over-prepare and you know it's a sign, you can get curious about it instead of just doing it. You can notice, The nervous system is running the scan without having to stop it in that moment, without having to perform recovery you don't feel yet. When you lie down and the noise starts, and you know this is the nervous system equating stillness with threat, that knowledge doesn't silence the noise, but it changes what the noise means. It stops being evidence that something is wrong with you. It starts being information about what your nervous system learned. That's a different thing to be in relationship with. This isn't about labeling yourself. The goal isn't to walk away from this video saying I have high-functioning anxiety as if that's a destination. The goal is to have language for what's been happening in a body and a nervous system that has been working very hard for a very long time without anyone, including you, fully understanding what the work actually was. Because here's what happens when you don't have that language. You explain the preparation as just being thorough. You explain the tension as just being a tense person. You explain the social exhaustion as just being introverted. You explain the 3 a.m. activation as just being a bad sleeper. And none of those explanations are wrong, exactly. They're just not deep enough to be useful. They describe the surface of the sign without touching the nervous system generating it. And you can spend a long time managing surfaces without ever reaching the thing underneath. Naming the sign doesn't reach underneath either. Not by itself. But it's the beginning of being able to. Because you can't work with something you haven't recognized. You can't be curious about something you've mislabeled as a personality trait. You can't have any relationship at all with something you've decided is just who you are. The name is not the destination. The name is just the first moment you stop defending against yourself. If this opens something, and you want to go one level deeper into which specific pattern is yours, the quiz in the description will do that in 7 minutes. The link is there, and it's also in the pinned comment. Which of these 7 landed hardest for you? And have you ever tried to explain it to someone who didn't get it? So here's what this actually was. 7 signs, 1 pattern, 1 nervous system that learned, at some point, that staying ready was the safest way to move through the world. And the reason those signs never made it onto the list you found before, the reason they look like thoroughness and realism and introversion and just being a bad sleeper, is that they were adaptive. They worked. The competence was the adaptation. The adaptation was the symptom. And you have been looking at your symptoms and calling them character traits for as long as you can remember. That's not your fault. That's what happens when the version of anxiety you're living doesn't match the version anyone thought to describe. The functioning was never evidence that you were fine. For this particular nervous system, the one that learned that performing calm was the price of belonging, that preparation was the price of safety, that vigilance was the price of not being caught off guard, the functioning was the anxiety. Those 2 things were never separate. The question worth sitting with, not to answer right now, but to carry for a while, is this. What would it mean for one person in your life to understand what these signs actually are? Not to fix them, not to have a solution, just to know that when you go quiet after a social event, or lie awake running the list, or need to prepare for something that shouldn't require preparing, that it's not a flaw. That it's a nervous system that has been working very hard on your behalf, using the only tools it knew. Anyone who's been in this knows how long it takes to find words for something that has never quite had them. If this was the first time any of this felt named, that matters. Not as a destination, as a beginning.